Chapter 8 of The Art of War is titled Variation in Tactics. Sun Tzu tells us that being an intelligent military leader is a very good, important thing. Making correct decisions on whether to engage, retreat, or anything in between based off the terrain we're fighting on is an incredibly big aspect of fighting. However, you have to, quote, understand the advantages that accompany variation of tactics to know how to handle your troops. The general who does not understand these may be well acquainted with the configuration of the country, yet he will not be able to turn his knowledge into practical account. Understanding the terrain you're fighting on is important, but so is knowing how to deal with it in a practical way. Think of it like a football game, or a football game. Reading the enemy's defense is important, but it won't do you any good if you don't know which attack formation or play to run next. If you can tell that your opponent's cornerbacks are blitzing, then that's fantastic, but you also have to have the knowledge to call an audible and throw a screen pass, or your observations are useless. In League, if you see that the enemy's doing Baron, Dragon, or a buff, or, whatever, that's good that you can tell, but it's no use if you don't know how to act on it. Telling your team mid is doing blue won't do much. You have to actually follow up with your jungler and try to steal and gank, or time it so you can set up to steal the next blue. Knowledge is good, but you have to be able to act upon it, and knowing a variety of tactics is only going to help. So the student of war who is unversed in the art of war of varying his plans, even though he be acquainted with the 5 advantages, will fail to make best use of his men. You know when you play a fighting game and you're new to it, and you're just learning a new fighter, or maybe it's an entirely new game, or maybe you've never played a fighting game before in your life. Well, when you're learning it, you know that time when you learn a new move and you think it's the best move, or maybe it's your favorite move, or maybe it's just flat out the easiest to execute, and you just spam that move over and over and over until your opponent figures out how to counter it. At least that's what I do when I'm learning a new fighter. Well, Sun Tzu is telling us to not do that right now, basically. Knowing how to split push or 2-man gank or bait a first blood is good, and some comps like poke comps do focus around one big idea, but you'll never be able to really reach your full potential unless you know how to split push and 2-man gank and bait first blood all with a poke comp. If you rely solely on a single strategy as a team or as a single player, it's only a matter of time before your opponent figures out how to deal with it, and because that's the only tactic you're doing, it'll swing the momentum back into their favor. Now, with something like an AoE, poke, or burst comp, you obviously do want to focus on a single strategy to defeat your opponents, and that's completely okay. What Sun Tzu is trying to tell us isn't to do a bunch of different strategies in a single game to confuse your opponents. That'll just end in a very schizophrenic playstyle that will most likely end in you losing. What he's saying is you won't be able to take full advantage of your team comp if you only focus on your single strategy. You have to have a larger amount of knowledge and be able to vary your tactics based off what your opponent is doing. Even if you're running a poke comp, that doesn't mean you shouldn't still try to do stuff like invade their jungle and steal their blue when their mid is going to pick it up. As an individual, this is also pretty important. You need to be able to apply yourself to different situations and use your knowledge to take advantage of your opponent's decisions. Only knowing how to freeze your lane or only knowing how to bait first blood can do one thing for you, but that won't ever be enough to become a truly great player. Always be learning and applying new tactics whenever the opportunity arises. Make sure that you never settle. Never tell yourself, I know enough about this game, now it's only a matter of playing solo queue over and over and over until I'm diamond. You always have room for improvement, and there's always more stuff you can learn. Make sure that you always have a good mindset for learning, and be prepared to learn and apply a variation of tactics throughout your games. Do that, and it should end in you being a much more successful player as time goes on.